Shifting to online assessment and evaluation.
As we look at this particular webinar, just wanted to remember that we're in the context of the community of inquiry as a model. And we focused on, in the earlier presentation, on the whole social presence, about how we can engage learners through setting a climate, supporting discourse, and the tools and the methods that work for us in the online learning environment. So this particular session is looking a little bit more at how we work as teachers in our presence about regulating learning into the cognitive presence side of things, which are equally important in how we go forward. So the community of inquiry model is how we frame things, but the actual tools and approaches here is what we're going to be sharing.
Thanks, Randy. And just a reminder from webinar number 2, we introduced Conrad and Donaldson's model of how to go about engaging students in an online environment. And we walked everybody through the steps. And if you happen to miss that one, you can always go back and check that one out. But just to put it in the context of this is the way that we approach engaging learners. And so what we're going to focus on today is how do I then use this model of Conrad and Donaldson's engagement and look at these 4 steps from the perspective of assessment and evaluation.
Before we do get into that, it's important to understand what is assessment and what is evaluation so that we're all on the same page. So assessment is considered to be formative. It's ongoing to improve learning, how learning is going, and identify areas for improvement, whereas evaluation is considered to be summative, and it's a final gauge to the cognitive presence within the students themselves to evaluate what has been learned and to arrive at an overall grade or score. And just for humor, I'm sure some of you have already seen some of these comics with respect to evaluations. My favorite one is, of course, Find X.
I love that one. Thanks, Shirley. And so I think as we're moving into this conversation about assessment and evaluation, it always is a little bit trickier when you get into an online environment. Sometimes people feel very overwhelmed with how do I go about doing this. The thing to remember is assessment, just like engagement, should be progressive throughout the year. We don't want to start with looking at summative assessments where grades are really important early on. We want to focus instead on the formative. We want to know what students already know, their previous learning, where they're at currently, and we want to build on that formative assessment piece. I really like this diagram up in the upper right, and the nice thing is you can always go back to these slides and take your time. But I like that these 2 slides demonstrate that the formative and summative, as though while they stand independently, they also blend together. And just like in building on that engagement with one-on-one learning and then transitioning to a more collaborative full community of learners by the end of the year, we want to do the same with the engagement of assessment and evaluation. They don't stand alone, they work together, and really we're looking at trying to build a place where students are able to be active learners and active evaluators of their learning as we work throughout the year.
Thank you, Stephanie. So when we talk about teacher presence with respect to assessment and evaluation, there are 3 components to it. It is defined as the direction, design, and facilitation of cognitive presence. The first component is direct instruction to assess cognitive presence. And as explained by Stephanie, this is a formative part of overall evaluation. And we conduct this to some degree in step 1. So it's the knowledge of teachers shared with the students. We focus on discussion here. We focus on questioning back and forth between the students, and then interaction with the teacher themselves. Of course, in step 1, it is only with the student. So it's not in group form. It's just interaction between the student and the teacher. We can have direct feedback where the teacher can, of course, support what the student is learning and guide the student along with reflection as well. The reflection can be both from the student, and then as the student submits reflection back to the teacher, the feedback is also very important. A little bit more detail about technical support, but it's how to troubleshoot problems such as low bandwidth. So as many times when, even for myself, when I'm working with students, if I find that there is issues with respect to lag time, then I'll turn off my video camera. I will also stop anything else that is happening in the background on my computer. I'll close all that down as well. And I'll use only voice. I'll record sometimes only my voice so that students can listen to it later on. Um, and I can share those recordings as well with all my students. It's also really important to have school support here. School board support, school and school support. Things such as student email, IDs, and passwords as well.
Thanks, Shirley. That technical piece is so important, and we have to make sure that we take advantage of the supports within the board to help us with that. So thank you for that reminder. You know, the first element of this, as Shirley said, is this idea of direction or direct instruction. And early on in those initial steps, we really do want to ensure that we're meeting the needs of each individual learner, and that we give them that opportunity to have that one-on-one time with us. That is so important. And just in time as well. Some students, you know, you'll be engaging with the entire class in one, as we have in our face-to-face classes, where one is completely competent and working solely on their own. They don't need my help. And you can do quick check-ins to find out who needs your help and who does not need your help. And ways that we can do this are things like, we've put some examples up here that we use, Shirley and I. Bottom left, you'll see an ongoing private chat conversation in Teams, where I've given them a task to do, and now they are just contacting me as they need through the chat function, and I'm able to jump in and have private chats with the video on or video off. It doesn't matter. In some cases, if bandwidth is really low, we can just have a text-based exchange to get them back on track and keep them learning. Top is Poly, which is, again, it's an app that's integrated right into Teams. If I want to throw out a poll question quickly to the students, I can do that with forms as well in Teams. It's very seamless. It's great within the live meeting. I can just throw out a quick poll question and see where everybody is at. Does everybody understand where X is coming from here? If I get a 95% yes, I can also see the 5% that are maybe struggling, and I can deal with them individually. So it's a way to get that immediate feedback from the class, keep everybody engaged, see where everyone is as individuals, which is hugely important. Kahoot, most of us are familiar with that. Seesaw is another very useful tool. In the bottom right there is ClassKick, which again, to me, a tool like ClassKick, I can't duplicate this in my face-to-face classroom. I can put out a question to my students, and I can watch the progress through each and every question and see where each student is at. They can put their hand up. I can see where they're at. There's no way I can see 30 desks when I'm in my face-to-face class. But when I'm here online, I can see exactly where everybody is at in the solving of the equation, and I can jump in and help as needed. So this is just an example of, you know, sometimes we think that we can't do our job as well online, and I would say there are certain tools out there that can really facilitate this kind of immediate feedback that we're really looking for.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in as well. Thanks, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. And Google as well, and the Google Suite of tools also has very similar types of features. So it's really important that the tool sets that you have available to you are the ones that you go to first. And then if it doesn't quite accomplish what you're looking for, then you look to others like ClassKick and Kahoot and Seesaw as well. But again, it doesn't really matter which tool set that you're using. It's the process that's about instant communications, about polling and feedback from students on an ongoing basis that you can reach out to. It's just not about sitting there in a Zoom class meet and only use that one tool or that one environment. You've got multiple environments that you can engage learners with, as well as for the assessment of learners.
Thanks for that, Randy. That's a good point. I think we're all, I know I can't speak for Shirley, but I know I'm getting a bit of an MS brain strictly because that's what I've been asked to use. But absolutely, there's a magnitude of resources out there and means of reaching our student. And you're absolutely right, Randy. At the end of the day, it's about using those tools that support our learners, whatever situation you're in. So thank you for that reminder. Again, when we talk about that direct instruction early on in those first steps of engaging the learner, and as we think about our evaluation, we want to ensure early on that we're not only are we providing that one-on-one feedback, but we're also helping our students early on to learn those critical thinking skills that are essential to evaluate themselves, to assess their own learning. And we got into this a little bit in webinar number 2. We got into some of the elements of self-reflection and how we build those skills in our learners. And one of the things that we can do early on is we can guide them in their questioning. So you could use a tool, again, Randy, Google Drive, a shared document where you could create a journal, an interactive journal where you are able to go in and see the students learning. But at the beginning, it's that guiding their learning. So it's helping them think about, what am I thinking about, that metacognition, thinking about thinking. And so instead of just saying, write a reflection, we're going to guide them. What are the things that you learned this week? What is something, maybe 1 or 2 things that really stood out to you in your learning this week or in this lesson? What activities helped you to learn? What activities did you find engaging? Or on the other end, what ones were challenging? We're getting them to really think about what they're doing and how that is working for them. So, and then again, what questions or comments do you have for me? I set the guideline, come to me with 2 questions about the previous lesson. So they're forced to really reflect on, what did I get and what did I not? And this is something that we just continue to build on bit by bit throughout the year. And there's a magnitude, again, of tools for this. You could use at the bottom here, I've got a working journal that I use in Teams in the class notebook, where I can get in, I can see each student, and I can provide some feedback to ensure that their reflection is really serving a purpose. Sometimes we just want to say, oh, that was great, that was really interesting. So teaching them how to self-evaluate and self-assess is really important. And again, we've got some other examples: voice threads, kid blog for the younger students, bright space. There's a lot out there, and as Randy said, it's really about choosing the one that works the best for you and what is available and at your disposal.
The next component within the teacher's presence is defined, as the first one said, direction, but the second one is design. So designing assessment and evaluation of cognitive presence. Again, we can do this through formative and summative. And we usually approach this in step 2 and 3 because it has to deal with small group projects, small group collaborations, and then even into larger group ones. So students' knowledge is shared back with the teacher with feedback from the teacher. We can work through quizzes, formal discussions in the classroom, either in small groups or larger groups, or the classroom as a whole. We can do group projects where they can submit videos and storylines, voice recordings as well. Application of knowledge and not just recall. So you can use real world situations and ask them to give you feedback, give you their thoughts, their understanding of what that project is. I'm presently doing one with respect to COVID right now with my class, which obviously is a real world situation. Reflection again, self and peer evaluation. I explain often to my students that they will be evaluated on their projects, but at the same time, they get to evaluate each other. And they also get to evaluate themselves. And it's interesting to see at times how students will, when they do self-evaluate, they don't necessarily give themselves such a great mark, which surprises me because they undermine what they have actually accomplished. Again, I'll go back to technical support. It is really important to have that technical support, especially when students are submitting videos back to you. Sometimes they can be quite large and therefore not so easy to email, for example. So many students will use the technical support that's available through either the school or the school board, the IT team, for example, to help submit work, assignments, etc., back to the teacher. You can use YouTube channels, or they can take pictures of their work and submit it back as well. So some of the designing evaluations that I've put up here have to do with Google Meet. There's the YouTube as well. And I've put up here Desmos. Now, Desmos is it's similar a little bit to ClassKick, but what I really like about it is the fact that the students are able to work at their own pace, and you can see how the students are progressing within the questions itself. The example here, there are 7 questions, and you can see the student working through the 7 questions. And you can actually see as well, go into each of the students to see what they are submitting and what they are working on. I've been working with teams and developing all of my material, my assignments, my quizzes, etc., through Teams. But of course, there's many more applications and platforms out there that you can use. I do use one-on-one oral exams, so I will ask the student to meet me through chat, for example, or through Zoom, or through any online platform, where I can ask them questions and ask them to submit their responses to me. They could write it down and then take a picture and send it to me, or they could just explain it to me. Again, through group collaborations, presentations, and even short quizzes. The quizzes are timed. The students realize that the quizzes are timed, and so they need to submit the responses to me. And as they submit it, they are being evaluated. They get their marks back as soon as they finish the quiz, for example. We can use, again, we talk about Seesaw, Brightspace, Wiki, VoiceThread, Google Drive, and Desmos as well.
To add to what Shirley's saying here about this designing of evaluation, I really, and I spoke with Shirley about this, the importance of incorporating rubrics and designing very meaningful and thought out rubrics. I know oftentimes, we'll go to a workshop and we're told to, where's the rubric? And, and we stick it in there, but we sometimes don't really walk the students through what the task is and the components of the task and how they're being evaluated and why they're being evaluated, those how and why questions that we want them to start asking for themselves. So early on, to me, I cannot stress enough the value of really, and I mean, further along, you can even bring the students into the design of the rubrics also. But earlier on, teacher develops the rubric, and then you walk them through, you define each component, you clarify the terminology. And then what I have here, I have an example on the top of a particular rubric that was designed for a writing activity. And then down below, the students are asked to work with peers. This would probably be about like end of phase step 2 into step 3, where they're working with a small group of peers, and they now are using that rubric to evaluate each other, and then ultimately go back and evaluate themselves prior to them submitting to me. We know the power, the cognitive power of social learning. We know that deep learning happens when there's social engagement. And so this is just another way where we are teaching them how to evaluate themselves in a really meaningful and thoughtful way. And so this is just one example of that. So the final component of this teacher's presence in integration with the cognitive presence is facilitation. This is it's the sad reality of where we are as teachers. We must evaluate, we must do that grade, we must input that, we must provide ministry exams, etc. So this is where we're at. We're in a place where we really don't know the situation, what lying ahead of us, but we know that at some point we do have to provide that summative component. We do have to offer tests and exams, in school, out of school exams. And this, again, I think, people say to me all the time, I'm an English teacher, just as an example, because that is what I predominantly teach. You can't possibly do an English exam online. I'm going to have to bring them in face to face because they can Google it. They can find the short story. They can find essays that have already been written. And I would argue, there are ways to design for that summative piece that get away from the ability to Google the answer. And that really falls on us to choose, if you're an English teacher like myself, there's things written all the time that are not out there on the internet yet. And it's about finding those and putting those in the hands of the students. Giving them time limits. They must, one of the examples I was speaking with Shirley about earlier with my English is I'll give them a reading and ask that they design their essay outline and send that back to me, knowing that they will be tied to that outline. And they can't make major changes. Obviously, we can make small changes, but that way, if they go away and they want to talk to 20 people at that point, it won't matter because they've had that limited time. So it can be done. We have to be thoughtful in our design again, and our facilitation, how we go about presenting these exams to the students. But it can be done, and it can be done in a meaningful, valid way in an online environment. But we do have to be thoughtful as educators to make sure that it's not Googleable.
Thank you, Stephanie, for this. Again, we work through Teams or Zoom. and Google Meet, for example. And so some aspects that we're working through right now is how do we evaluate the summative evaluations when we're online, and we want to be able to see the students. And so we've decided to break up the classes. I have a class of 33, for example, and so I will eventually at one point split up the group, and so I will have them online with me, but I'll be able to see them. So I might have 6 students at a time, and I'll be able to watch what they're doing, watch that they are filling out the forms, watching that they're answering the questions. So this is one way of being able to work through, especially with ministry exams that are quite important, could be mandated by the school board or, of course, mandated by the ministry. We use exams in the gym that's large enough in order to put many desks in there, but still maintain a social distancing dictated by the ministry. I know that we have smart boards in our schools. That you may have a smart board in your school as well. One of the tools I really enjoyed with the smart board was the interactive one, where the students could drag and drop answers to specific questions. And there are tools out there that can be done as well with online. And so if you practice that within the classroom, it is possible to practice the same thing online. Now, the charts that you see in front of you have been developed by Learn, and you can find these charts under Educators Toolbox learnquebec.ca. The task or the activity is noted on the left, so it could be content delivery, digital worksheets, for example. And you can even see quiz and check-in, reflections, math and science exploration. And then, of course, on the right, there are some examples of tools that you can use in which to conduct activities for math questions and math exams and science questions, etc.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, that those tasks and go-to tools were created by a number of the Learn teachers working collaboratively to create that list, and it is a very extensive list and really user-friendly, looking at a multitude of tools. So, thank you for running over that, Shirley. I think it is really valuable, and there are a lot of really valuable tools out there on the Educators Toolbox at Learn, in these webinars and previous webinars that we've done at Learn throughout COVID. And really, as we wrap up this webinar, and it is the end of our three-part series here, and I myself, and as well as Randy and Shirley and Maggie, want to really, again, bring home this point of, this is a community. We are in strange times. We don't know what lies ahead. And so the importance of finding your network of people to support you personally and professionally is just paramount. Whether it's engaging students, whether it's finding resources, whether it's using the tools, reach out to people around you. We just really want to stress that it's not about it's not about the education, I guess, so much as it is about the connection, and it's about that community. And of course, education matters, but if we don't have our own well-being, we don't have the well-being of our students, learning won't happen. We all know that fundamentally. So take care of yourselves, take care of your students, and the learning will be able to happen. And find those networks, find the people who can support you in your school, in your district, and globally. Use those resources that are out there, and do not feel like you're alone. That would be our biggest takeaway from all of these webinars that we're putting on. Reach out for help and know that you're not alone.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's so important to know that you are not alone, and that collaboration amongst all of us is really important to be able to help out, because it can be overwhelming. And just another little takeaway is just to, one step at a time, and don't feel you have to do everything all at once, all at the same time. These are just some resources that we used when we developed this webinar here. And we just want to thank you very much for being a part of these webinars.
Thank you, everybody.